All right. The last thing I want to talk about with functions is what's called a return. Okay. Now, what I mean by that is normally when you run a function, let's use this function we built in the last video. I built this function. When we run it, it does this, and then it goes back to wherever the next line of where it was called, right? Um, so it does whatever's inside of the code, but that's it. Okay. Sometimes we're going to want the function to return a value from what it did. Okay. So in other words, like whatever happens here, let's say just for the sake of argument, let's say that's, for the sake of argument, my function takes in a number and then I manipulate that number equals number plus 5 or something. The problem is that this change only happens within this part of the code, but it doesn't affect the code overall. But what I could do is it's like, well, maybe I want that number to be sent back to this part of the code. I could do what's called a return. When you do a return, you can return something like a number or a string or whatever, a Boolean. Okay. So let's see how that might work out. All right. I Here's what we're going to do. All right. I am creating a variable here called message. Message is a variable. We're going to pull out our old friend empty box here, or empty container. And this is, I'm not going to pull out all this post-it notes, but we call this message, right? The problem is it's empty. It doesn't have a value. Now, normally we would set something like, it would come afterwards, but it'd be like, message equals, some text or something like that, right? Here's what we're going to do. Let's say I do something like this. Okay. Message is equal to the function add text. Let's do a little Blackboard code. Okay. I got a variable, it's blank. I'm saying the value that's going to go in here is equal to this function. Okay. Even if I were to do this, let's just say for the sake of argument, message equals some text. Now, this seems like it should work because it seems like, oh, all right, well, you have this function, or not this function, but you have a variable and, we're running this function. It goes here. We're defining it right. We're initializing it. We're giving it a value of some text, and then it comes back and it should print, right? So that everything looks kosher, right? But let's watch what happens when I actually preview this. While I sneeze. Excuse me there. Anyway, let's go and return console, and it says undefined, right? What happened? I thought we defined, we set the value here, right? Well, here's the problem. When you set a variable here, this is what's called scope. This variable does not exist outside of the function. So once you leave setup to go to draw or to go somewhere else, we can't actually see this container anymore. It doesn't exist. So we can't, because this doesn't exist, you can't add a value to it. So then it goes back and it's like, this is just null or undefined. Actually, it's undefined because it's like and then when it says to print it, because we never really gave this a proper value, it's just, undefined. Okay. So here's what we're going to do. I want to fix that problem. What I'm going to do is I want this function to send back a value to here. If it sends back a value, to here, then this will become equal to whatever that returned value is. So what do I mean by that? Well, let's just say for the sake of argument, I'm just going to get rid of this. Let's say I'm just going to return, I don't know, a number like 10. Why 10? I don't know. I just made it up. Okay. What's going to happen? Well, this function is running. This is saying, okay, whatever happens, send back the value of 10. And that means message is equal to 10. And then when we print this, it should print 10. Okay. And it worked. I could also return a Boolean, like, I don't know, false. Same thing happens. This runs. This says, okay, return that value of false to here. Message is equal to false. You print it out. It should say false to the console. Does that work? Well, let's try it out. There you go. See how logically it's working out? It could also be a string. So whatever string I'm going to return is going to be what the message is. So I don't know. I'm just going to make up a message. Hello world. It is a sunny day, or whatever I want to put. Okay. This runs the function. It returns all of this whole string that goes back to here. Message is now equal to this. When I tell it to print it, it's going to print the whole message. Oh, okay. So what's nice about returning is when you run a function, it doesn't, and by the way, it doesn't matter that it came from setup. If I had this inside of draw, the same thing would happen. It doesn't matter that, I called it from setup. It could be called from draw. It could be called from some other place. It could be called from an event handler like mouse press or keyboard press or whatever. See how it's repeating that many times, right? All right, so the point of a return is you can return something back to where the function was called. Otherwise, only what happens in here is actually going to be run, but it's independent of this, okay? Unless it's a global variable. I could do something where, if I had said let x, and then I said, I don't know, let's just say for the sake of argument, this function is saying x is equal to, hello world, and then I said print x. That would work because this is a global variable. But the idea is like, if that was the case, we don't need to run a separate function for that. You could have just done it here. Usually the point of doing this in a function is like, we don't know where we're trying to do something that's more specific. But you can decide when you want to do this or not. I'm going to go back. All right. I have a function here that I created called function add numbers. And it's going to take in it has two parameters, number 1 and the second, number 2 or whatever, number A and number B, however you want to label it. Okay. Then inside of the function itself, I'm actually going to perform an action. The action I'm doing here is I'm making another variable. I just made it up called total. And total is just equal to whatever 1 and 2 are together. Okay. So I'm going to call this function. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a variable called number total. And I want that equal to me running this function called add numbers. And let's add the two numbers together. So I have to give it two numbers like, I don't know, 1 and 5. So what I'm going to do is, if I were to do this right now, unfortunately, if I were to run this, this would be equal to undefined again, because this total value that we create, it doesn't come back here because this has to stay within this function. And so we can't, that value can't be updated. But what I'm going to do is say, let's return the total value. This is a a variable I just created. And I'm going to say, so whatever the value of this is, that value is going to go here. Then we just created a new variable called number total. It'll be equal to whatever the variable of total is. And then just for fun, why don't we print the value of it just so we know that it worked. Print the value of the two numbers is, and then I'm just going to use variable substitution here. So I'm just combining some text with the variable. I'm going to hit save. Oops, wrong page. Let's do this. This is exercise 10. And if I go back, the value of the two numbers is 6, which 1 plus 5 should be 6. If I change these numbers, 100, 500, or I don't know why you're doing everything as powers of 100, but I don't know, 300. Value is 400. I don't know. You can even use negative numbers. Negative 10 and 50 should be 40, because when you add negative to a positive, it's like subtraction. Okay. So this is another example of me returning something. In this case, it's not something it's not based on me. It's based off of a variable that's being manipulated by the input coming in, the parameters. Okay. So if I change the parameters, this number changes when it gets sent back, if that makes sense. Okay. I know it's a little tricky. It takes a little kind of getting used to. All right, let's do one more. All right, we're going to make one from scratch. All right, what I'm going to do is we're going to make a function called greeting. All right, function greeting. I want it to take in a parameter called name. Okay. And what I want to do is whatever name it's given, it's some sort of string. So like Andrew, Bobby, Calvin, Dennis, whatever. Let's take the name and we're going to add it to a whole greeting. So I'm going to make something called text. And I'm going to say, my name is, and we're going to use this. Okay. So whatever is here gets substituted into here. This variable is equal to whatever this is. Okay. And then what I'm going to do is return text. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to, okay. I'm going to make a new, let's do a new variable called message. And message is going to be equal to the greeting function. And I'm going to put in a string. Let's use Andrew to start off. And then let's print that variable. All right. So I know there's a lot going on here. Let's just kind of walk through it a little bit. All right. I have a function that I created called greeting. It has a parameter called name. Whatever name gets passed into it, which is really just a string, that gets added to this variable's value. So I created another variable called text, which is equal to my name is, and then whatever the name that gets submitted here. So if it's Andrew, it's Andrew. If it's Bob, it's Bob. If it's Calvin, it's Calvin, so on and so on. And then we're going to return whatever this whole thing together is, we're going to return that to here. We're making that the value of this new variable I created called message. So if I submit this, it should say my name is Andrew, or Andrew gets submitted here. I know there's a lot going on. Andrew. It's a giant game of basically variable substitution. that becomes my name is Andrew. And then this gets returned back to, I don't want my name. This is going to be the worst handwriting I've ever seen is Andrew. So then message is now equal to that. And then we're going to print message. And then so all of that together should equal, oops, wrong page. I think, oops, I think I made a mistake. I think I forgot a semicolon. Oh, I forgot to close this out. There we go. Setup tree. No, actually, oops, yeah, I forgot to put brackets there. Okay, now it should work. My name is Andrew. Okay. And if I run this function a couple of times, let's do it again. Let message be message B equals greeting, Becky or something. And message B. Okay. Hopefully that makes sense what's happening here. So it's like, once again, by the way, this can happen from anywhere. So here's what I'm going to do one more of. Let's combine this actually with maybe like an input, like a mouse input or a keyboard input. So I'm going to use the event handler key pressed, which you guys did a little practice of that. And when someone presses their key, that's when it's going to run my let message be equal greeting. I'll use Becky in this case. Print message B. Oops, B together. Okay. Save. Okay. So my point that I'm trying to demonstrate here is here it's happening from the setup and it's running the function and coming back. So it's like, okay, we have a variable that's equal to this function with this particular argument. That goes to here, Andrew, my name is Andrew, return text. So, my name is Andrew gets returned there and it prints it, right? But we can also call it from here. So if I call it from here, it creates a new variable, runs the greetings function, uses Becky instead of Andrew in this particular case, gets that, my name is Becky, becomes the value of this, returns it back to here. And so it's going to be, hello, my name is Becky, and then it prints it. So my point is, like, I'm calling it from different parts of the code, but when you would say return, it doesn't have to return. It can return to different parts of your program. Hopefully, does that make sense? Okay. So if I, do this and I return, oops, I have to hit key on my keyboard. My name is Becky. Okay. Let's do it one more time just to kind of show it. Function. Let's do a mouse pressed. And I'll call this message C equals greeting, Calvin. Print message C. Okay, so that one happens automatically because it's in the setup. I press, if I press a key on my keyboard, it does that one. And then if I click on my mouse, it does that one. Okay. So I'm running the function from different parts, but the return can happen to different parts or areas of my code. Okay. That's what hopefully you guys can kind of see that. All right. Why don't you guys try that out? That was 9, 10, and 11. Okay.